YouTube, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 13 articles in this episode for you. Been a busy news day. All these URLs are in the description of the video for you. The first one I have here is off of Western Journalism, and it says, resigns over role in 2012 leak of information. We can get the hamster to cooperate a little bit here. This has to say. Come on, hamster. Well, then the hamster decided to bottom of the dead burn page. Come on, hamster. Hamster needs to be smacked around. Not being very cooperative here. Come on. Most aggravating I think he's been to me in a while. Or what his dead burn problem is here. Silly thing. Hey, hamster, make up your mind. Scrolls all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom. You don't have no happy medium about him. Cut him some slack because he's only got 3 legs and out of about half of one of his eyes, and fell out, little bald hamster. For goodness sakes. Okay, I think we're getting it here. Richmond Federal Reserve President Jeffrey Lacker announced his immediate resignation on Tuesday, admitting his involvement with 2012. Lacker said a conversation with an analyst from Medley Global Advisors in 2012 may have disclosed confidential information about federal options. Conversations, Medley Global Advisors reportedly a September 2012 policy setting meeting. Those details were made public one day before the central bank's own record of a meeting, I guess it is, during which officials discussed a major massive bond buying stimulant for later. They just scrolled it up a little. Have to work. The Medley report controversy became a topic of debate in Congress, leading to a criminal investigation. Of 2015, Financial Services Committee Chair Jeb, Republican of Texas, subpoenaed documents and information related to the leak. Come on. Little feller must have bumped his head or something. Goofy. Oh my goodness. Here with this. All over the place again. Sake. Mother of pearl, come on. Get this thing change. Goofy hamster. Give up on it and let you pull the URL up and read it for yourself, because berserk here. What I've got to look forward to in the rest of all these. Hey, almighty. For crying out loud. Never seen the beat of this in all my days. Okay, although it was my intention to cooperate fully with the review, I regret that I did not the general counsel either my December 6th, 2012 or the December 10th, 2012 interview that the analysis was in the possession of confidential information, he said. Admitted that he did not reveal what had transpired until 2015 when he was investigated by the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the Inspector General of the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Apologize to my colleagues and to the public I have been privileged to serve. I've always strived to maintain the appropriate balance between transparency and confidentiality, but I regret since I crossed the line to confirming information that should have remained confidential, he wrote in his statement. He said that he had initially planned to step down in October, but instead was making immediate. Well, it took him 5 years. Something wrong? Are you kidding me? Really interesting. You know, this kind of was buried in Western journalism. I hadn't seen this else. And yeah, we have North Korea and all these, you know, Susan Rice and all this other stuff, but and was in charge of the Fed and because he did something wrong 5 years ago, and this news. Throw something shiny. Watch, look over here, something shiny. There's nothing to see over there. As far as I'm concerned, Fed president resigns over role in 2012 leak of information. Liberty Riders. He just said the truth about Susan Rice freaking out. Managed to drop another bombshell on America. Today, he gave a private Oval Office interview to the New York Times, of all people. Crazy, especially considering their history of lying. However, he dropped a major bomb on a reporter today. Do you think Susan Rice committed a crime? Trump responded with, do I think? Yes, I think. They were trying to get him in some sort of stupid gotcha question, but he totally owned them. Kept it plain and simple. Susan Rice is a career criminal, period. Obama was probably in on her crimes, period. And considering this story is basically Watergate on steroids, he made it very clear how big this thing really is. I think it's going to be the biggest story. It's such an important story for our country and the world. Biggest stories of our time. Soon everyone will realize the Russia scare was all part of Obama's tactic to cover up his own traitorous actions. Next one I have is off of Western journalism. Jr. says should have gone to CNN in advance. Donald Trump Jr. took on to Twitter on Tuesday to lambast a recent interview in which former National Security Advisor Susan Rice denied spying on President Donald Trump's associates for political purposes. After Rice appeared on MSNBC's Andrew Mitchell Reports for an interview, Trump said she should have gone to CNN. That way she could get the questions in advance. The president's son was referred to an incident last year in which interim committee chair Donald Brazil, who at the time also served as CNN commentator, relayed debate questions in advance to Democrat presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. Trump Jr. was also pointing out questions as opposed to real questions lobbed at Rice during the interview. Should have gone to CNN. That way she would get the questions in advance. Who am I kidding? They were never going to ask real questions, Donald Trump Jr. tweeted out. Bombshell report, Rice had allegedly requested that members of Trump's transition team be unmasked in intelligence summaries. Americans caught on Italy during surveillance are generally not named unless specifically requested home or hence asked. On this, and the article continues, says there were occasions when I would receive a report in which a U.S. person was referred to, name not provided, just a U.S. person. And sometimes in that context, in order to understand the importance of the report, significance, it was necessary to find out or request the information as to who the U.S. official was, Rice told Mitchell. It was normal for national security officials to request sometimes that identities be uncovered. The notion that some people are trying to suggest asking for identity of a person is leaking it, or unequivocally false, Rice said. There's no connection between unmasking and leaking. Blogger and political activist Mike Cernovich was the first to break the story about Rice. He praised Cernovich on Tuesday, saying he deserved to win the Pulitzer Prize. Donald Trump Jr. tweets out, congratulations to Cernovich for breaking the Susan Rice story. In a long gone past journalism, he'd win the Pulitzer, but not today. Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, has called for Rice to testify under oath for her involvement in trying to expose Trump's associates. If it is allowed, we shouldn't be allowing it, but I don't think we should just discount how big this deal this is that Susan Rice was looking at these reports, he told reporters on Monday, and she needs to be asked, did President Obama ask her to do this? A directive from President Obama, I think she should testify under oath on this. The next writers. Kennedy is pissed. Look what just leaked about what Obama did to him. Journalist Mike Cernovich had a phone conversation on air with Got News founder Chuck Johnson. Watch that here in this if you care to pull it up and look at it. It says, this is huge. According to Chuck Johnson, Sean Hannity and Eric Prince were spied on by Obama. Massive. Obama was the spy. Liberal media won't admit it, but Obama spied on everyone. Frickin' everyone. Tweet says, breaking news, Obama administration spied on Sean Hannity and Eric Prince per Chuck Johnson. He needs to know this. Get this out there. This just came out right after the leftist media pointed out that had a secret meeting with Chanel's, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Chelles. There is more video where Hannity says Susan Rice has a lot of explaining to do. Article we have of disobedient media, and it says cyber firm behind Russian hacking claims has ties to Soros-supported think tank. The cyber firm CrowdStrike has been one of the main proponents of allegations that Russia interfered in the 2016 American presidential election using their cyber capabilities. The analyst performed by CrowdStrike was relied on almost exclusively by the Democratic National Committee to establish their claim of Russian hacking. It has subsequently been revealed that CrowdStrike both misrepresented data in an attempt to frame the Russian government for cyber attacks, and also failed to account for known capabilities of third parties which enable them to impersonate Russian hackers. The founder of CrowdStrike is also tied to the Atlantic Council bank supported by George Soros, which has been accused of accepting funds in exchange for support of favored policy positions, as well as promoting disinformation and propaganda attacks establishment figures. CrowdStrike claims of Russian hacking cannot be independently verified by government agencies. Known techniques. On June the 14th of 2016, CrowdStrike published a study commissioned by the DNC in which they accused the Russian government of breaching the DNC's computer systems. The DNC's choice to rely on CrowdStrike exclusively was controversial. CNN reported that the DNC actually refused to grant the FBI access to their servers, despite the agencies explicitly stating that they to rely on third-party data. The report by CrowdStrike stood as one of the first definitive authorities which found evidence of Russian cyber infiltration meddling in the 2016 elections, rather than confirm the notion that Russia in elections. A number of other developments report have cast increasing doubt on their claims, suggested that they may be part of a widespread attempt to push disinformation for financial gain and benefit clients and affiliates. That CrowdStrike may have been promoting the idea of Russian hacking out of ulterior motives began to emerge almost immediately after their report was released. On July the 28th of 2016, the Washington Post reported that CrowdStrike was one of a number of cybersecurity firms making a large to widespread fears about Russian hackers. Beyond running a report which the DNC, the drumming up of fear about Russian cyber menaces meant creating a blatant of interest for CrowdStrike. Analysis also ignored known capabilities since publicized by WikiLeaks in their Day Zero and Marble releases from the Vault 7 series, which have proven the existence of cyber capabilities that allow programmers to mask the identity of their malware and masquerade it foreign intelligence agencies and mimic their online attack methods. They have also shown that many programmers have the ability to create an appearance of false attribution, which give the impression that the malware was created by another country, even mimicking the native language of the host country they intend to attribute the attacks to. CrowdStrike has misrepresented data in order to push anti-Russian narratives. 22nd of 2016, CrowdStrike ran another report alleging that Russians hacked into a Ukrainian artillery app, heavy losses of howitzers in Ukraine's civil war with Russia. The report was intended claim of Russian hacking in the presidential election. The report was immediately contested by maker of the Ukrainian military app in question, who called the company's report delusional. On March the 23rd of 2017, ran a damning piece citing British think tank, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, that CrowdStrike erroneously used IISS data as proof. Furthermore, the IISS disavowed any connection to the CrowdStrike report. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense also claimed that the combat losses in hijacking never happened, meaning that CrowdStrike had apparently fabricated facts and details in the report completely. I told the Voice of America that they stood by their findings, but Voice of America noted that CrowdStrike had altered their report, deleting key assertions that they had made the report about Ukrainian army losses, where infection contributed to artillery losses, and a link to IISS data. The humiliating redactions apparently came after CrowdStrike had spoken with an IISS research associate for defense and military analysis. The apparent misrepresentation of data, which had been intended to support CrowdStrike's claims of Russian hacking, creates serious questions about the merits of their claims that alleged attacks on computer systems earlier that year. Ties to the Soros-supported Atlantic Council has revealed that CrowdStrike has deep ties to a think tank which has a history, practices, and a track record of seeking to confrontation between the United States and Russia. CrowdStrike's founder, Dimitri, acts as a senior fellow for the Atlantic Council. In February, Disobedient Media reported that the Atlantic Council has a troubling history of taking money from foreign interest groups, agencies, in return for pushing propaganda to support various initiatives around the globe. Times has named the Atlantic Council along with and the Center for Strategic and International Studies as being think tanks which have made undisclosed agreements with foreign governments. The Atlantic Council for having opened into an aspect of the influence buying that has not previously been exposed. And a report by the Associated Press identified the Atlantic Council as one of a number of think tanks which had received funding from Plowshares Fund, which was a major player in efforts to sell the Iranian nuclear deal to the American people. Plowshares Fund is financed by George Soros' Open Society Foundation. The council consistently promotes hostile rhetoric. The organization has also promoted and founded claims that Russia was responsible for hacking the 2016 U.S. presidential elections, despite the fact that theory has been resoundingly debunked by various authorities in the intelligence community and by multiple media sources. The Senate Council, unfazed by the evidence that their claims of hacking were false, have continued to promote in the aftermath of the election, in which appeared to be a possible effort to undermine American democratic institutions. The conclusion here says the tight relationship between CrowdStrike and a think tank, which also has a long track record of promoting unproven claims about Russian hacking, their failure to account for false attribution techniques commonly used by programmers to frame other countries for hacking attacks, and their country factual and misleading claims about Russian hacking creates concerns about their ability to objectively report on whether or not the DNC servers were breached by foreign 2016 elections. Their association with the DNC comes at a time when the party has been attempting to craft a narrative of alleged Russian hacking to support their election bids in the upcoming 2018 U.S. midterm elections and delegitimize their victories of their political opponents in 2016. Council's past relationship with George Soros is also problematic, given that Soros has deep financial ties to groups organizing resistance movements as part of an attempt to enact regime change in the United States. As former CIA Director Michael Morrell and the Office of Director of National Intelligence have all clearly stated that there is not, nor has there ever been, any evidence that Russian hacking affected any election results in the 2016 U.S. presidential elections. The efforts of CrowdStrike to promote the claims to the contrary raises serious questions about their research, as well as the intentions of DNC in preventing neutral regulatory agencies from examining their servers firsthand claims. The next article I have is off of Conservative Tribune. California takes first step to become sanctuary state. To cooperate here and roll this up a little bit. I suppose crazy here. Any state that elects Jerry Brown as its governor again isn't too firmly tied to reality. So it's no surprise when California passes some profoundly ignorant legislation. However, the state's ignorance became positively sinister on Monday when the California Senate passed a bill that would turn the Golden State into America's first sanctuary state. According to the Sacramento Bee, Senate Bill 54 from being used for local California authorities to assist federal immigration enforcement. It passed Monday on a party line vote of 27 to 12 and was headed to. We are trying to make our communities safer and be intelligent about this. Democrat Senator President pro tempore Kevin, no rhetoric and no bluster. However, the bill faced heavy opposition from law enforcement and Republicans. This bill is unsafe, said Senator Jeff Stone, a Republican. This bill is unlawful. This bill is designed to make California a sanctuary for dangerous criminals. And the hamster must be taking a break. Tough time this morning. On hamster. Work with me. My goodness gracious. Sure. Well, come on, boy. Let's get with the program. I'm going to have to retire this hamster. I see this coming. I apologize on behalf of the hamster. Trying to make our community safer and be intelligent about this. Democrat Senate President pro tempore crying out loud. Poor Kevin DeLeon said, no rhetoric and no bluster. However, the bill faced heavy opposition from law enforcement and Republicans. On hamster. Thanks. I think I'm going to have to. A little bit more. Come on. Well, he's going to do something and then he just falls off the wheel. Okay, I think I've wasted enough time waiting for the hamster to cooperate on this article. This one is in the description of the video if you want to pull it up and read it yourself. Maybe your hamster works better than mine. It's called conservativetribune.com, California Trump Sanctuary State. So the next one that we have, let's see if he'll work any better on this next one. Lines. North Carolina lawmaker admits H was driven by image media. Let's see, this one says North Carolina lawmaker who drove the final effort to successfully repeal officially demonized House Bill 2 B2 admitted this week that her motivation was the media played it up and to get nation off our back. State Representative Sarah Stevens, a Republican who represents Mount Airy, served as the model for Mayberry and the Andy Griffith Show and pushed for passage of House Bill 42, which erased the language of HB2 from North Carolina statutes. Law was known as the transgender bathroom bill that required individuals to use public restrooms and changing facilities according to their sex identities on their birth certificates. With the Wilkes Journal Patriot, which covers part of the district in rural northwestern North Carolina, Stevens said HB2 were irrelevant in or I'm sorry, were irrelevant in light of attacks from the national left, who were emboldened by liberal news coverage, major corporations, CEOs, sports organizations, and Hollywood celebrities and performers. HB2 was not a bad bill, the newspaper reported, but us, North Carolina, a bad image because of the way the media played it up. HB2 became a stain on the state that needed to be removed, said Stevens. It was to get us back to where we were before, Stevens told the Journal Patriot. A reset of the dial to get the rest of the nation off our back. Organizations that supported HB2 in North Carolina bristled at throwing out what they saw as a sound law that protected the privacy and provided legal protections for women and children when they are in restrooms and locker rooms. Disconcerting when regulation is done according to image, said Preach, executive director of the Christian Action League. Whatever happened to the truth? Whatever happened to conviction? If lawmakers simply float with the currents, if they're not firmly guided by the highest principles and ideals, then they become nothing more than an voice. Tar Heel lawmakers who supported Stevens' bill felt a heightened sense of urgency to rid themselves of HB2 because the NCAA deadline last week to repeal or else face losing college sports tournaments for the next 5 or 6 years. By meeting the demands of the NCAA and all other business interests and sports organizations who have bullied North Carolina, our leaders have demonstrated that the most and the loudest wins, said North Carolina Values Coalition in an analysis issued on Wednesday. Likely be used again since it works. Of House Bill 142 last week, several legislators represent rural districts said calls and emails to their offices overwhelmingly opposed repeal of House Bill 2. Perhaps it would be appropriate if we, the passage of this by the governor, to come down to the building today and lowering those two flags, the U.S. and the North Carolina flags, outside the legislative building and putting up in their place a flag of certain Intercollegiate Athletic Association and a white flag, said Representative Burt Jones. Their perception, Tar Heel State and nationally, that HB2 was a bad law, almost universally hated, was false. Groups of pastors and civil rights leaders defended the bill. America praised the fact that an attempted repeal in December failed. Widely read online conservative publications said the law was sound and sensible. Other states have sought to advance legislative equivalents to HB2, matter of who lawmakers took their cues from. The passage of House Bill 142 did not appease Human Rights Campaign or Equality, the two most vocal advocacy groups that caterwauled HB2. They have continued their campaign against the state because they say the replacement law still does not provide protections for transgenders and gender fluids to use any restroom that matches their identities. Some businesses, groups, and public officials have said they will continue their boycotts of North Carolina in support of HRC and Carolina. Legislation that passed will provide no reset. Lawmakers who voted for repeal and replace are not likely to succeed in getting the HRC and other leftist groups off our back until every vestige of HB2 is removed, either by straight up repeal or knocked down by a progressive court. These insidious social terrorists cannot be pacified or placated, he added. They must be defeated. The article I have is off of Liberty Headlines. 163 Syrian refugees entered the U.S. in the last 6 days, all Muslim. Settlement is cranking back up under President Trump as 836 refugees have entered the United States in March. The WND reported last week that Trump administration would more than double the influx of refugee arrivals from 400 to 900 a week. Appears to be exactly what's happened. Of the 836 total over the past 6 days, the two largest groups had come from Syria and Somalia. From Syria, 163 have entered the U.S., all of them Muslim. From Somalia, 107 refugees have entered, all Muslim as well, according to data recorded by the U.S. State Department's Refugee Processing Center. Since Trump took office on January the 20th, 317 Syrian refugees have entered the U.S., and 1,299, or 98.5%, have been Muslim, 15 have been Christian, and 3 Yazidi. Another 1,182 refugees have come from Somalia since Trump took office, all of them Muslim. The top 5 states for receiving Syrian refugees since Trump took office are as follows: California, 135, Michigan, 127, Illinois, 96, Texas, 92, Arizona, 88. States also receiving large numbers of Syrians under Trump's watch are New York, 79, North Carolina, 77, Ohio, 66, Florida, 65, New Jersey, 53. Settlement, and especially Syrian refugees, has caused controversy and division in city after city since the attacks on Paris and Brussels by Islamic terrorists in 2015 and 2016. Some of the terrorists came to Europe claiming to be Syrian refugees. Obama administration ramped up the refugee arrivals from Syria from a few hundred in the first 2 years of the country's civil war, 15,000 in the last 2 years. A steady stream of Somali refugees has been arriving weekly in the U.S. since 1990s, averaging about 8,000 a year. More than 132,000 Somalis permanently resettled in the U.S. Promise to pause refugee resettlement until extreme vetting could be implemented. He issued 2 executive orders, one on January the 27th, order on March the 6th. Among the idea leaked to the Wall Street Journal include requiring all immigrants to have their phones and social media accounts examined. Both orders were struck down by federal district courts in Washington and Hawaii, and those rulings were upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The only hope for them to be reversed now lies with the U.S. Supreme Court. Argued that Trump could have avoided the courts by not including the 120-day refugee pause in his executive order, along with a 90-day ban on travelers. He could have merely sent a memo to the State Department and Congress notifying them that he was lowering the annual ceiling on refugee admissions. Under the Refugee Act of 1980, the authority to set annual ceiling lies squarely with the president. Inserting the lower ceiling of 50,000 down from 110,000 set by Obama for fiscal 2017 into an executive order, he allowed the courts to strike it down. After that happened, the State Department said it would resume refugee admissions at a level of 900 per week, which would work out to about 62,500 for the fiscal year ending September 30th. 63,000 average annual refugee admissions total since 9/11 terrorist attacks. Hawks are getting nervous, still force feeding the false message that Trump is banning refugees because they're making money off this. He's stirring up their base and raising a lot of money. But in fact, refugees, said Ann Concoran, author of the Refugee Resettlement Watch blog. So if Trump caves into the left, he doesn't get any brownie points with them like him anymore. They're just going to gin up their base protest because he's banning refugees, when in fact he's at all. Concoran added, is still hand selecting refugees for distribution into more than 300 U.S. cities and towns. It currently has about 10,000 refugees in the pipeline destined The Trump administration is also honoring an agreement negotiated by the Obama administration to take at least 1,300 refugees from Afghanistan and other Muslim nations off the hands of Australia. The department and its contractors are still bringing them in, and he could have done a 120-day moratorium without announcing it to anybody. Stop it for 4 months with exceptions for extraordinary cases. So there's no analysis of extreme vetting because they're still coming, and they're coming without extreme vetting. The next article, lines. Blame spreads for slow pace of placements in Trump administration. Republican insiders have grumbled for nearly 2 months about of Trump appointees getting executive branch agencies, and now Republican senators are going public with their frustrations. Media reports suggest that some slow pace is due to Trump's administration disorganization, some due to Republican in-party fighting, and some, or maybe a lot, due to Democratic obstruction in both the Senate and the agencies themselves. James Real Clear Politics gives a good overview. Republican senators are growing impatient with the White House's slow pace in filling out and are pushing President Trump to speed the nomination process, concerned that the cabinet deputies, executive branch's ability to function, taken longer to confirm Trump's nominees than it has those of past presidents. But Trump also has been slower to make nominations. Of the more than 1,200 jobs that require Senate confirmation, 553 are considered key positions by the nonpartisan nonprofit Partnership for Public Service. The vast majority of those 553 Partnership for Public Service. Try that again. The vast majority of those 553, including deputy assistant and associate secretary posts, remain unfilled. Blah. Further, the Senate 22 Trump nominees as of Thursday, with no others except Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch, likely before the Senate breaks Friday for a 2-week recess. In the same time period, according to a record kept by the Washington Post and the Partnership for Public Service, Barack Obama had 54 appointees confirmed, 32 confirmed, Bill Clinton had 44 confirmed, and Bush had 27 confirmed. First, Bush faced a Senate of the Trump is likely to fall even further behind during the Easter recess. By April 23rd, the date the Senate returns, Obama had an additional 7 nominees confirmed. Clinton had an additional 2, and George H.W. Bush an additional 23. Senators John Cornyn of Texas, Lamar Alexander of Tennessee, John McCain of Arizona, Bob Corker of Tennessee, and Marco Rubio of Florida were among those who complained about the slow pace. Even Democrat Tim Kaine of Virginia and Sherrod Brown of Ohio registered their grievances, albeit for different reasons, with Kaine wondering if the spots are being deliberately left empty in order to hobble the bureaucratic state. Media outlets have noticed the delays. National Review's Jim wrote that by late March, an administration that considers immigration enforcement such a priority would have named its own director of U.S. Citizen and Immigration Service, or its own Customs and Border Protection, or its own Assistant Secretary for Immigration Enforcement at the Department of Homeland Security, or its own Secretary or Assistant Secretary for Population and Immigration at the State Department, or a new director of the State Department office to monitor and combat trafficking or immigration-related fair employment practices at the of those slots. Is the result of state Democrats using maneuvers at the beginning of the administration to slow down the confirmation of cabinet secretaries. Fill high sub-cabinet spots if the secretary is not in place. By February 11th, for example, the Washington Free Beacon reported that Democratic obstructionism caused the confirmation process to be moving George Washington's administration. As the publication explains, Senate Democrats, vowing to use everything they can to stop Trump nominees, have used procedural tricks like boycotting commitment to slow the confirmation process to historically slow pace. Even for Trump's landing teams, people usually with prior government experience hired on a temporary basis to help smooth the transition to a new administration, Democrats have been raising Cain. Two members of the Education Department transition team, Taylor Hansen, who were the subject of scathing challenges, Democratic U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren of New York Times news story, accused by of being slanted against the transition team. Moderate conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post challenged the premise of the Times article and asked pertinent questions, saying, a public-spirited official to do? If someone with relevant experience and the right background wants to serve and goes these requirements, and there is no way to be hired without being accused of impropriety, qualified and ethical people won't serve. Some of the delay, Democrats. Reports are rampant of disputes between Trump White House and their cabinet appointments themselves about who should be appointed to lower-ranking political slots. This reporter has reliably been told of several such examples, with the White House nixing potential appointees for having no record of having worked for Trump during the last year's campaign. Reported at a subscribers-only site, these disputes are particularly rampant at the Environmental Protection Agency because some Trump loyalists are of new EPA Chief Scott Pruitt, complaining that he's been too slow in implementing Trump's campaign agenda and fearing he's positioned himself for an Oklahoma Senate run. Struggles over appointments have been acute at the Department of Defense. January 6, 2 weeks before Trump actually took office, the Washington Post that then incoming Secretary James Mattis was clashing with Trump team over transition staffing. The State Department, where Trump personally nixed the proposed appointment of longtime conservative foreign policy guru Elliott Abrams after being told that Abrams had harshly criticized Trump last year. Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah offered a more view of all this to Real Clear Politics. You've got the president who hasn't really been around Washington very much to the process, so it's naturally going to take a little longer for him and his people to make these determinations, Hatch said. They're moving, but not as fast as I'd like. Well, I have lines, and it says IRS seized $17 million in legally earned cash. Departments aren't the only ones seizing money from citizens without charging them with a crime. The IRS is in the civil asset forfeiture game too. Years from 2012 to 2014, the IRS stole more than $17 million from innocent business owners, deliberately targeting their earnings for an easy steal. Anti-money laundering rules and civil assets forfeiture, the agency compromised the rights of individuals and their businesses, a government watchdog has discovered. The Inspector General for Tax Administration, called the TIGTA, on March the 30th, it details how IRS investigators seized hundreds of bank accounts from business owners based on nothing this pattern of deposits. 90% of those cases, the money was completely legal. The audit also found that investigators violated internal policies when conducting interviews, failed to notify individuals of their rights, and improperly bargained to resolve civil cases. Reports to combat criminal activity, individuals and businesses are required to report all bank deposits greater than $10,000 to federal authorities. Intentionally splitting up large sums of cash to $1,000 amounts to avoid that reporting requirement is known as structuring and is illegal under the Federal Bank Secrecy Act. But many business owners engaged in perfectly legal activities law covered by insurance policies that won't cover cash losses greater than $10,000. Still others simply on the advice of bank employees or colleagues. String is technically a crime, but the reporting requirement to detect serious criminal activities, including terrorist activities, money laundering, and drug trafficking. They were not put in place and could enforce the reporting requirement, as IG report explains. The IRS didn't let that stop them. The agency pursued cases from 2012 to 2015 on suspicion of structuring, but with no indications of connections to any criminal activity. Simply depositing cash in sums less than $10,000 was all that it took to arouse agents' suspicions, leading to the eventual seizure and forfeiture of millions of dollars in cash from people not otherwise suspected of criminal activity. General found money seized and forfeited by the IRS was contained in 91% of a sampling of 278 structuring investigations it reviewed fiscal years 2012 and 2014. Those funds totaled $million. There we go. And involved 231 cases. The investigation was launched in 2014 after lawsuits by the Institute for Justice, or the IJ, including its report, Seize First, Question Later, by TIGTA, or try this, help bring the abuses to the public's attention. The investigation also found it reports Department of Justice attorneys working with the IRS encouraged quick hits where property was easier to seize rather than pursuing cases with other criminal activities such as drug trafficking and money laundering, time-consuming. The government appeared to bargain non-prosecution to resolve cases, often ignored reasonable explanations for transactions that appeared of structuring. IJ attorney Johnson issued a statement in response to the report, and some details he points out are particularly concerning. He says the IRS gave no warning prior to these seizures, and the IRS did not speak to property owners to see if there might be some honest explanation for the pattern. Even when property owners provided an innocent explanation for their banking practices, the IRS watchdog found that the agency did not even consider whether it might be true. For it, an unsurprising result of civil forfeitures, which allows agencies like the IRS to use money that they seize to fund their budgets. J have returned some money to some victims. All of the ill-gotten assets are returned to their proper owners. Justice will not be served, says IJ. Forfeiture cases take up a small or large percentage of all IRS forfeitures because the IRS does not publish that information, and denied requests filed under the Freedom to make funding a audit were released shortly after another government corruption bombshell was revealed. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, $0.2 billion in cash over a 10-year period from people who were never under criminal investigation. Yep. The next one we have is off of BizPac Review. On ethics complaint filed against Adam Schiff, the same honor as did. Will Schiff respond with the same honor as did Devin Nunes? The Washington, D.C. based conservative governmental watchdog group filed a complaint with the House Ethics Committee Thursday against Representative ranking Democrat member of the House Intelligence Committee. Founder Larry Klayman, founded Judicial Watch, joined in the 6-page complaint against Democrat. In addition to publishing a news release describing the complaint, claimant announced it Newsmax appearance on Thursday, and there is video in this if you would care to pull it up and watch it. Among other things, Freedom Watch alleges that Schiff was fully aware of and sought to cover up multitudes of felonies of warrantless surveillance of U.S. citizens within the domestic United States under the previous administration. There's a letter here to Honorable Susan Brooks from Freedom Watch. Freedom Watch, I hereby file this complaint against Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Investigation of these facts and circumstances by the committee, appropriate and strong remedies to follow. The U.S. House of Representatives Code of Ethics for Government Service, at Part 2, B12, 1958, H. Con. Res. 585th Congress requires that any person in government service should, 1, put loyalty to the highest moral principles above loyalty to government persons, party, or department. Number 2, uphold the Constitution, laws, and legal regulations of the United States, government therein, to their evasion. Principles ever conscious that public offense is just. It is now clear that the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Schiff, has been fully aware of warrantless surveillance of U.S. citizens within the domestic United States for partisan political purposes and partisan information. These multiple felonies have occurred under the presidential administration of both Barack Hussein Obama and George W. Bush in the wake of 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. With Freedom Watch's a video of the complaint, and that video is also in this. Pull it up to watch it. Ethics Complaint Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, the California Republican, stepped aside from his role in the committee's probe of alleged 2016 presidential election. Of impropriety. Similar complaint has been filed against the committee's ranking Democrat. Schiff, so step aside. So far, he hasn't. View says Hillary comes out to tout a new book, unabashedly and pathetic. The two-time failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is writing a self-pitying memo title saying everyone to blame but me. After her stunning defeat, Clinton blamed her loss to President Trump on the following: Russia, WikiLeaks, James Comey, her amazing career success. Certainly, misogyny played a role. Clinton said Thursday at the Women in the World Summit in New York, some people, women included, had real problems with the idea of a woman president. But alas, never fear, Hillary told comrades that she heroically refused to give in to the misogynistic bullying, and that enraged her opponents even more. Part of the personal attack, part of the bullying, part of the name-calling is to crush your spirit, to make you feel inadequate, to make you doubt yourself, she said, and I just refused to do that, and that infuriated them even more. That society has a long-standing disdain for ambitious, successful women like herself, and that's why she lost an election that came virtually for her. With men, success and ambition are correlated with likability. So the more successful a man is, the more likable he becomes. With a woman, guess what? It's the exact opposite. So the more successful and therefore ambitious a woman is, the less likable she becomes. That's the inverse correlation that lies at the heart of a lot of the attacks Many both supporters and detractors disliked her because she came across as insincere, uncaring, and untrustworthy. Also blamed Russian meddling and FBI Director James Comey's criminal investigation into her private unsecured email server for her election loss. Meddled with our election, said Clinton, who famously pandered to Russia by giving them a reset button when she was Secretary of State in 2009. Clinton, who called her loss devastating, said she'll chronicle her defeat in excruciating detail in her forthcoming re-election. Hillary claimed she isn't interested. I'm looking at doing interesting things, she said. I don't think that will ever include running for office again. Meanwhile, Twitter comically jabbed on blaming bids. Watching Clinton, she has so far blamed 2016 on Russia, WikiLeaks, misogyny, weaponization of info, nothing T. Beckett Adams. Clinton and likability are correlated with a woman. Guess what? It's the opposite. Another one says, oh, they Mary, poor Mary. Or tweets or whatever you want to call them. Article in this episode that I have is about Twitter. It's off of RT.com. And says Twitter sues U.S. government for unlawful attempt at exposing rogue. And it says Twitter has sued the Department of Homeland Security over its attempt, the creator of an alternative U.S. citizenship and immigration underline USCIS, which has posted tweets. The account, seemingly written by a member of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, is one of many rogue government accounts set up in the wake of President Donald Trump's inauguration. The account, Alt Food and Drug Administration, were created after a number of negative Trump tweets sent from government accounts were removed. Thursday in Northern California District Court, DHS and U.S. Customs and Border Protection from unlawfully abusing a limited tool, yeah, easy for me to say, to unmask the of those behind the alt USIS account, which has been used to express public criticism of the department and the current administration. The CBP sent Twitter a summons for records that would expose the identity of the account owner and ordered the company to keep the recent request quiet. It required Twitter to produce usernames, account login, phone numbers, mailing addresses, and IP addresses of the account holder. The lawsuit questions whether CBP has the legal authority to request the information. The reason for the request, which was based on largely related to taxes, and argued that providing the information would have a grave chilling effect on the speech of that account in particular, and on many other alternative agency accounts that have been created to voice dissent. Along with the DHS and the CBP, DHS Secretary John F. Kelly, CBP Acting Commissioner Kevin, and Special Agents Stephen P. Caruso Hoffman. The lawsuit calls for the court to find the request unenforceable as it violates the First Amendment rights and its users by seeking to unmask the identity of one or more anonymous Twitter users voicing criticism of the government of the concern. After the news broke, the USCIS account posted an news article if you want to see it. It says the account also gained 33,000 followers in under an hour after the news broke. That's all I have in this episode. Got one here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your channel, subscribe. That way, I'll see you on the next episode.